Who rigged my rainy trash poster? Pissed the seat and hurt my keys! My ass! Where's the paper towels?
You're over here, Dad, in this bag.
Throw them over here! Ouch! Motherfucker, you been a dick!
Sorry.
You're lucky one hard! I mean, this thing, not my dick! Fuck balls! Damn, these fish sticks are hard as tits! Oh, Bob Saget! Oh, Bob Saget! Oh, shit! Oh, Bob Saget! Oh, shit! Shit! Oh, damn it!
Sup, sobers. So first of all, I didn't even know until like sometime in 2024 that Bob Saget had passed. I don't know. I'm just out of the loop. I don't watch news media because, well, most of it's fake news anyways. But when I found out, I didn't really ask that many questions. But like I've talked about in most of my previous stories, it just did not feel right. Deep down inside, just didn't feel right. But after diving into the Olsen twins a little bit last week with my Heath Ledger episode, which is a super good episode, you should definitely check it out if you haven't. I'll try and put a card right here. But I got to check out some things that were really curious about Bob Saget, and everything I saw was extremely conflicting and confusing. However, one thing I did realize is that there is two different sides to Bob Saget. So perhaps it wasn't too far-fetched to think that maybe behind closed doors, he was as bad of a guy as they say. Maybe not. But I couldn't help but wonder, where are all these rumors coming from? And why are they coming up? Kind of led me to the thought that maybe there isn't two different sides of Bob Saget. Maybe there's just the one side. He's just a really good actor. Maybe he is as bad of a guy as they say. So I started looking into Bob Saget's story and the things he was involved with, people he was working with, different theories about him, and ultimately what happened to him. And man, when I tell you guys that this gave me hardcore Chris Cornell vibes, man, I am not lying. This is one of those cases that is just, well, it made my head hurt. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, then you should probably go check out my Chris Cornell video. But I had so many questions. So I grabbed my computer, I grabbed an energy drink, and I said,
let's go. Alcohol.
okie dokie, welcome back to Sobering Stories with me, DJ Petrovsky. Welcome to the new studio. Got all of our painting done. We got new carpet. It's like a whole new basement studio area. It's phenomenal. So I don't know. Let me know what you guys think in the comments. Doing a little bit more of a minimalist theme here. And yeah, I don't know. I'm stoked about it. I think it's pretty sick. Got room on the wall behind me now for that 100,000 subscriber play button. So, you know, if you haven't shared this with your best friend, then definitely do that. Otherwise, just hit that like button. If you don't subscribe, please subscribe to the channel. It's a lot of work to put these videos together, and so the more people that are out there viewing them, that's all I want. And this is all great information that people need to hear about. Business item number 2, this is kind of just the sponsor for the week. As you guys know, I'm not actually sponsored by anybody, so I'm not getting paid for any of these. This is just people that I think need a shout out, or things that need a shout out because they get overlooked. Sponsor for this week is actually going to be Liquid Death. I don't know if you can see that. Yeah, Liquid Death. And if you guys haven't had one, I mean, it's pretty standard soda water stuff. There's like 100 million different soda water options out there. The thing I like about Liquid Death, in terms of being a sober person, is that every time I go to a bar, they typically carry Liquid Death as one of their options for soda water. So not only can I buy something and have something to hold, because sometimes you just need something to hold at a show, it just feels right, or anywhere at a bar, whatever. They market these cans to look very much like alcoholic beverage cans or like cool cans, so that when you're out drinking, people just see it, they just kind of breeze over it. They don't really care what you're drinking, but it kind of makes you blend in a little better, in my opinion. And so, I don't know, I use Liquid Death when I go out most of the time. It's also carbonated, which I truly love. Sometimes that carbonation factor can be a piece of the addiction, and I know it was for me. They have so many good flavors. I don't know. I'm drinking one now, Dr. Death. The names are hilarious. Murder Your Thirst. Phenomenal company. I highly support what they do, and I just wanted to pass that info along. I truly believe that they target the sober community because they just know that it's difficult to be a sober person when most of the cool shit to do involves drinking or doing other things. Maybe I'm just feeling that way. Maybe I'm making that up, but that's how I feel, and that's why I buy Liquid Death. So give them a try if you haven't. Like I said, I don't get paid on this. I'm just drinking one. Yep. And this isn't necessarily like a business item or anything, but my eyes are like burning super bad to keep them open. Feels like Clockwork Orange kind of stuff right now. I don't know why, but they're just on fire. So if I blink a lot, I'm sorry, dude, but that's probably why. And let me just check with the boss. That's all the business items. That's everything we got? That's all the business today? I'm here by myself, so let's get down to business. Robert Lane Saget was born May 17th, 1956 in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. He was born to parents Ben Saget, who was a supermarket chain executive, and Rosa Lynn Saget, who was a hospital administrator. Once Bob was starting high school, his family packed up and moved to Norfolk, Virginia, and that's where he would attend Lake Taylor High School. And Bob grew up in a Jewish family, so when he moved to Norfolk, he also attended the conservative synagogue Temple Israel, and this is where he had a pretty rebellious streak. And it said this is where he kind of developed his sense of humor and kind of his identity when it comes to just making people laugh. Bob would have his bar mitzvah in Norfolk, but because they didn't really have any family out there, they decided to pack up and move again. And they moved out to Encino, California. That's kind of in the Los Angeles area. And they lived there for a few years, but eventually they moved back to Philadelphia, which is where Bob would actually graduate from high school. Once Bob graduated, he would experience a series of family tragedies that would ultimately shape him quite a bit. It would develop a much darker side to him. It was a huge development of his dark humor because he used humor as a way to cope and kind of to deflect the emotions and feelings he was experiencing with so much loss going on around him. He lost one sister at the age of 34 to a brain aneurysm. He lost another sister at the age of 44 to scleroderma, which he would eventually go on to be a huge advocate for this disease and just a huge advocate and donator and just all these things for research for scleroderma. But he also lost 3 uncles before they turned 40 years old. So all of this happening within like a 10-year time span is a lot of family members to lose. Now, originally his plan after graduating was to go on and become a doctor, but he had an English teacher in his high school who thought that he just had great promise in terms of an acting career, and she thought that he should foster that creative energy and kind of talked him into pursuing acting as opposed to pursuing being a doctor. And what a cool teacher, man. Like, we need more teachers like that. Really just down to earth, really help guide you the right direction that you need to go, really actually give a you know what I mean? But because of this little nudge in the other direction, he decided to enroll in Temple University's film school from 1975 through 1978. He seemed to do really well here because he produced a black and white film called Through Adam's Eyes, and it won a Student Academy Award. So obviously he was nudged in the right direction. And to truly perfect his craft, not only was he attending the university, but he was also doing his stand-up act at New York clubs. He was performing at the Improv and Catch a Rising Star, just really working to nail down his comedic style and just get better at acting and performing on stage. After graduating in 1978 from the Temple University, he would go on to continue performing his stand-up act, and he would actually almost die at one point. He went into the UCLA Medical Center and he was having real bad stomach pains, and they found out that his appendix was not doing good, so they were going to remove it. They kept it on ice for about 7 hours, and then they realized when they were removing it that this thing was gangrenous, so he seriously could have died. But once he recovered, he'd go back to auditioning, and he actually landed a couple of small roles, but he would eventually land himself a spot in 1987 working as a CBS early morning show host. The show only aired for like 9 months and then they canceled it. So a lot of reports say he got fired, but that was honestly a great thing because there was a guy who was starting a show called Full House and they'd already filmed a pilot with another actor filling the spot of Danny Tanner. Somehow they knew about Bob Saget and they knew that they wanted him for this role, but he was already tied up with this CBS morning show. So he was kind of off the table. But once this morning show canceled, that freed up Bob to now be Danny Tanner. So not only did they can this original guy, But then they brought in Bob Saget to be Danny Tanner, re-recorded the pilot episode that they had already recorded with the original actor, and then aired the show. The show aired from 1987 all the way through 1995. And if you haven't heard of the show, I mean, I'm sure you have, but Full House was about Danny Tanner, which was Bob Saget's character. He's a widowed father of 3, and he lives with his best friend and his brother-in-law, and they take care of these 3 kids. And so it's a pretty full house. Probably like most of you, I love that show. It was great. It was funny. And the Olsen twins were adorable. But like I talked about last week, just makes you wonder what was going on that show. In that interview I showed last week, there being this room for him to go to where he can do his inappropriate acts. Just kind of a weird anecdote, really. But this show was a monumental period in his life because this show skyrocketed Bob Saget to success. Everybody knew who he was. Honestly, the show was great, and it ran for multiple seasons. And there was no specific number saying exactly how much he made per episode, but the Olsen twins were making roughly $25,000 per episode once it actually got going, roughly around season 3. And they say Bob Saget was obviously making way more than that. So he was probably making $50,000 to $80,000 per episode of that show, which ran for, 8 years? So the guy made money. But apparently he didn't make enough, because simultaneously, while working on Full House, he was also working as the host of America's Funniest Home Videos from 1989 through 1997. Dude's doing 2 TV shows. And I read that he was making $70,000 to $80,000 per episode on AFV. He was banking so hard. But yet again, this is another family-friendly show. The stuff you see isn't too wild or out there. And he's known for his family-friendly commentary that kind of adds to and makes the videos even funnier than they already are. And last week we showed that interview where he was trying to talk about how AFV basically became YouTube, but he says Yoo-hoo, and he's super confused.
It was kind of like silent film, and it became Yahoo.
Yoo-hoo?
You can cut this, right?
YouTube.
YouTube. It became Google.
It became Google. Well, in your dreams.
But he's kind of right. I mean, AFV did turn into what original YouTube was, just a bunch of funny, weird, nonsensical videos of people making home movies that are usually pretty funny and comical. From here, Bob would go on to be the narrator for one of my all-time favorite shows, How I Met Your Mother, and I honestly didn't realize it was him for a really long period of time, but then I was like, wait, is that Bob Saget's voice? So he plays future Ted Mosbey.
You know who I think could handle a problem like that? Who? Future Ted and future Marshall.
But you never see him. He's just always the narrator. And that show, again, ran for a really long time. I think from like 2005 through 2014. He was featured in the show Entourage, playing a zany version of himself. And then he had a cameo in the movie Half Baked, which is quite literally one of my favorite movies.
Marijuana is not a drug. I used to suck dick for coke. I seen them. You ever suck some dick for marijuana? Huh? I didn't think so. Boo this man!
And his part in that movie is unforgettable, truly. And one of his last big roles was from 2016 through 2020 when they did the Fuller House, kind of Full House revamp. And so they brought back a lot of the same cast and just did like a new show further along in life with everybody a little bit older, new kids in the mix. Unfortunately, Mary-Kate and Ashley Olsen opted out of being in Fuller House, which seems a little strange. They were probably one of the more crucial and pivotal characters in the show. So for them to not even want to come back to do the reprise seems weird. Makes you wonder why they didn't want to come back.
So I was on good behavior, but sometimes I did some inappropriate acts.
All right.
Now, according to Bob's book, Dirty Daddy, that he wrote in 2014, he says himself that he experimented with the devil's lettuce. He sniffed a few coffee tables in his time, but he never really got deep into any of those things. He was never a heavy user. He says the only drugs he ever really takes are the ones that he uses for his anxiety, his cholesterol, his sleep disorder, and for animal tranquilization. If you know what that is, it's the Special K. Bob talks about how things didn't get real bad for him until 1997 after his divorce from his wife, Sherry Kramer. At that point, he kind of went off the deep end, drinking all of the time, mixing tequila and whiskey and just blacking out a lot. He said that really only lasted up until 2003. He had an experience where he was drinking and driving, ended up pulling up onto a curb and then got pulled over, and he was completely blackout. And this kind of just scared him straight. It says right after this, he quit cold turkey, drinking completely, and he focused entirely on being sober. And Bob wouldn't get remarried again until 2018, but his wife, Kelly Rizzo, she corroborates this fact. She says that he was sober from 2003, and he had been sober when she met him, and he was sober all the way up until 2022. So though he did have kind of a troubling past and a rough few years after that divorce, it seems like he turned things around, and he was honestly living clean, living sober, and was on a really great path for many years. I mean, shoot, that's almost 20 years of sobriety. I think one of Bob's creative outlets where he really put his time and focus into, which helped keep him sober, was his stand-up comedy. He was working on doing his stand-up while he was also filming Fuller House, so still maintaining that two-sided image of the clean dad persona, while at the same time hosting these super dirty, raunchy stand-up sets. And so it just shows he can really be two different people. Some of his comedy and some of his humor can get pretty dark. Even for people like me who appreciate that dark humor, it was still like, whoa, you just say that? And some of it's almost like shock factor, shock value, to where he might be the only one that thinks it's funny, but the fact that he was so shocking is funny in and of itself. And this would create kind of this iconic persona for Bob Saget, because he went from being this American dad figure, very clean, America's Funniest Home Videos, very clean, to now these super off-the-walls, adult-oriented stand-up sets. People were just like blown away at, is this the real Bob Saget? Has he always been like this? I think it caught a lot of people off guard. And in 2008, there was a Roast of Bob Saget, which I'm sure a lot of you guys have seen it. It was absolutely hilarious. And there is some pretty interesting things that are said in this roast.
Why should we pick Bob Saget, who raped and killed a girl in 1990?
So taking this roast into consideration and all the allegations against Bob about possibly doing something to the Olsen twins on the set of Full House, and then it comes to light that he's actually this really dirty, dark-humored individual, it makes people wonder, like, what was he really capable of? What was he really doing back on set with these kids? And is there the possibility that Bob Saget is a bad guy? And thanks to Gilbert Gottfried, nobody knew whether his joke was real or not. Everybody was like, wait, did he really do that? And then his joke says, well, no, it's not true that he did this. But he's saying it with a sarcastic tone, so it makes you wonder, did he do this? Of course, he says he never did. And in this interview that I saw between him and Gilbert still never fully says that it's not true. He just keeps saying the joke over and over and just makes it even more confusing to where you're like, did he really do this?
Yeah, I was saying Bob Saget raped and killed a girl in 1990.
And you were objecting to anybody that would spread that rumor.
I was saying, and it's not true that Bob Saget raped and killed a girl in 1990.
And you said it's absolutely not true, right?
And if you have proof.
That Bob Saget raped a girl and killed a girl in 1990, then come forward.
And then I'll tell you the problem with me as a human being is a lot of people yell all different stuff at me. Some of it is from family stuff I've done, and a lot of it is from things that have not been family stuff. That is something that people will put virally on Twitter or on Facebook.
You're kidding.
Or on Instagram, and I can't block it. And the reason is I can't go, hey, come on, I didn't do that. Gilbert said that at the roast. You can't deny, and I also can't remove it because it's a comedic bit. So it stays within my Twitter universe. And that's just incredibly upsetting.
I remember.
But you're defending me. You're saying that I specifically did not.
It is untrue that Bob Saget raped and killed a girl in 1990.
You could do it with anybody's name.
Yes.
You could give a whole defamatory.
But in your case, it's true.
That I did not.
It is not true that Bob Saget raped and killed a girl in 1990.
By the way,
typically for jokes like this, though, they have to have some partial truth for the sarcasm to come across. So what was this partial truth? Makes you wonder, right? But I digress. Bob was continuing doing his stand-up, and once Fuller House ended in 2020, he was still out on tours, and obviously this was COVID time, so he had to pack things up for about a year and a half. But once things opened back up, he went back out on another tour called the I Don't Do Negative Tour. And this would last from September 2021 all the way to May 2022. Bob was kickstarting his tour with 3 different Florida dates. When he gets to Florida, he checks into his Orlando hotel. It seems like he was just going to stay in this hotel and then just drive to the different locations for each show. So on January 7th of 2022, he actually had a show in Orlando, Florida. That was the first show of the tour. On January 8th, he ventured 2 hours out to Jacksonville, and that was where he had his second show. He would then make the 2-hour-long drive back to Orlando, back to the Ritz-Carlton hotel where he was staying. When Bob arrives back at the hotel after making this 2-hour drive from Jacksonville, he valets his keys with this valet at the hotel, and the two of them actually take a picture. And the news all interviewed him. Everybody talked to this guy and wanted to know, like, what was your last interaction like? Was Bob okay? Did he seem off? And he's like, no, he seemed normal. He took a picture with me. He wasn't slurring his speech. He wasn't acting funny. He seemed totally normal. He was in good spirits. And yeah, took a picture with me and then said goodnight and told me thank you and took off to his room. He seemed fine all the way up until he got back to the hotel. Nothing is indicating that he's fallen or hurt himself or is under the influence of anything to where he's obviously seeming like something's wrong. Once he arrives, or sometime around when he arrives to the hotel, he posts his final Instagram post that he'll ever post. It's a picture of him at the Ponte Vedra concert hall. Looks like the show is finished, and he's just talking about how he can't believe he just went through a 2-hour set and how he's addicted to this stuff again, and he's stoked for the rest of the tour. So obviously the show went well. Obviously he's still coherent. Obviously nothing bad seems to have happened to him at this point. And his post is grammatically correct. It doesn't seem like he's under the influence or misspelled or anything. Everything seems normal. One of the weird things about Bob Saget's final Instagram post, though, is that at the very bottom, he says that he's going to keep going and keep doing this until he gets his special shot. That made me think that maybe there was somebody else involved. Maybe they were the ones that left this door open and entered into the room, but they left it open to make it seem like there was no foul play. And they gave him a special shot that took him out, left him unalived in bed, and fulfilled his prediction, because maybe he knew this was going to happen all along. According to the hotel's key card room entry system, the last time he entered his room, the last time his card was scanned, was at 2:17 in the morning. He just finished a long show. He just drove 2 hours back to his hotel. I'm sure he just wants to shower and chill and get ready for the next one. But to be honest, what happens between 2:17 a.m. and 4 p.m. the next day, we don't know. So of course, this is where things get a little murky. According to some sources, Bob's family was really worried about him because they knew he was supposed to check out of his hotel at 3 p.m., but it was 4 p.m. and they still hadn't heard from him. So they called and they ordered a welfare check to be done at the hotel. I have other reports saying that because he was supposed to check out at 3 p.m., it was 4 p.m., the housekeeper walks up to the door, knocks, nobody answers. She assumes that everything is fine for her to go in and clean, and she enters the room to find Bob Saget unresponsive, laying peacefully in bed. Simply based on the fact that literally none of my stories that I've talked about in the past ever has these people being found by a family member, I'm more likely to believe the scenario where the housekeeper was trying to get into the room and clean it and then happened to find him, just because it seems to make more sense with all of the other stories I've covered. It's always a housekeeper or a personal assistant or a trainer or a masseuse. It's never the family. So why would the family have figured it out this time? But we do have a 911 phone call that was placed by the hotel staff to, obviously, 911 dispatchers. In the call, they very clearly state that there's an unresponsive guest in room 962, and they need to have somebody dispatched right away to come help them with this situation.
911, what is the location of your emergency?
Good afternoon. I'm calling from the...
What is the address?
The address is...
Okay, and what's going on there?
We have an unresponsive guest in a room. My officer is telling me that there's no pulse and the...
Okay, what room number?
He's in room...
Okay. Non-responsive, not breathing.
Yeah. Not responsive, not breathing, and no pulse.
Okay, stay on the line for medical. One moment.
Thank you.
Though most of the body cam footage has been redacted or unreleased or, removed from the internet, we do have a clip from the body cam of the police when they actually arrive on scene and first try to make contact with whoever this guest is that's unresponsive. And they go to a room that they think he's in, which is actually room 961, only to find out it's not the right room. He's in room 962, which is right next door. So then they walk right next door, and if you look really closely, you can see that the door is already open.
Where is one? Oh, nobody's here. Oh.
They're in there.
Who's in here?
Liliano.
Oh.
Yeah, and security.
Move your arms a little bit more when you walk.
I think it's 961.
Huh?
I think it's 961.
You want to call Ripple?
Yeah, call him really quick.
Call him real quick.
Oh, it's 962.
Oh, that's right.
And this is a fact that I couldn't find anything else on. Like, nobody's talking about this fact. I couldn't find pictures of it. I couldn't find anybody talking about it. Nobody seemed to think that this was interesting. However, all the news reports do mention that there was no signs of forced entry. Well, yeah, you wouldn't have to force yourself in if the freaking door is already open. Also, there's supposedly surveillance footage, again redacted and removed, wiped from the internet, never to be seen. And this surveillance footage supposedly shows him putting the privacy, do not disturb sign on the outside of his door after he checks back into his room at 2:17. If that's what he did, he put this little note on there, do not disturb, and then proceeded to not close the door. That seems a little weird. So something's already not piecing together for me. Now, why are all these things redacted? Why is everything removed? Why can't you find any information on this stuff? I'll tell you why. Because after Bob Saget passed away, his wife and his daughters filed a lawsuit against the Orange County Sheriff's Office to have them redact and keep any sort of personal videos, photos, medical records, any sort of information that would be important. They want that removed. They want it sealed. They want it kept out of the public. And since the Orange County Sheriffs originally did release this stuff to the public, they were suing them and trying to get it all from being released. And they were successful. So that's why we can't find pretty much any information that's probably important information for us to know. And this really may have nothing to do with anything. Might mean something, might mean nothing. But Kelly Rizzo, Bob Saget's widow, she didn't really wait that long before getting involved with somebody else. It's speculated that in sometime mid to late 2023, she starts dating this guy named Breckin Meyer, who's another famous actor, closer to her age, because Bob Saget was 65 and she's 45. And so I think her and Meyer are about the same age, around 50. So it makes a little more sense. But she didn't wait very long. I think she maybe waited like a year after Bob passed to then move on and get with a new guy. And yeah, I don't know. Just seems like really quick. If my partner passed away, I don't know if I'd ever move on, but if I did, it certainly wouldn't be within a year, year and a half. After about a year and a half, there's pictures of them kissing at some event. And then finally, in early 2024, she actually makes a social media post like wishing him a happy birthday, and they're at some race, and it kind of like officially outs them as being a couple. But yeah, like that's just so weird. That seems so fast. I feel like the only reason she might be able to move on quicker is if she knew some sort of information that she didn't want released to the public and sued the Orange County Sheriff's Office for. But that's just my opinion. Now, some reports, like I said, they mentioned that the housekeeper went inside and she's the one that found Saget in his bed looking peaceful. She realized that he was cold to the touch. It freaked her out, so she called her supervisor, and the supervisor actually came in, and he was the one who supposedly started CPR and tried to revive him. But unfortunately, he was already gone. After this, it's said that the police arrived to do their investigation. They find Bob laying in bed. He's got his left arm over his chest and his right arm down by his side, just laying there in bed, looking peaceful as ever. There's no signs of any sort of foul play, according to the police. There's no visible trauma to his body. He just looks like he fell asleep and just never woke up. And this hotel room looks about as cleanly as you would expect. It was tidy. It looked super clean. He had his bags and everything in the closet area, all kind of packed up. He had some clothes hanging up on the hangers. It looks like he took a shower because there was a towel thrown into the bathtub. However, the towel that leans over the bathtub wasn't touched, so he didn't take a bath. And the floor mat in front of the shower is placed there, so you know that he probably took a shower after a long night driving, doing a show, and just wanting to unwind for the night. But the hotel room was pretty much spotless. You know, nothing crazy, didn't look like there was any struggle, didn't look like anything happened. In fact, Bob was just laying there on the made bed on top of the sheets. So the pictures that we see, you can actually still see the ruffled up sheets from where he was laying. But I looked at these pictures for a while, you guys, because there had to be something weird. And I found some weird stuff. Number one, the safe. When you look in the pictures where his clothes are and his bags are and his shoes and all that, the safe is like wide open. Now, all of the safes, when you first get into the room, start open, but they're like mostly closed. They're just not latched. And that's so that you can reprogram your own code, put your stuff in there, lock it up, use it for yourself. And then when you leave, they're supposed to go in, unprogram it, open it up, make sure it's ready for the next guy. This safe was wide open. So if there was anything important in this safe, say a big stack of cash or something that he didn't want stolen, it's gone. It's not there because the safe is empty. The next thing that I noticed, which I honestly didn't really see it, but apparently this is what it is. There's a picture of the trash can. There's an orange juice bottle, which we do see. And supposedly there's a miniature Grey Goose bottle that was also thrown in the trash, hinting to the fact that he had himself a nightcap, which could be possible. But if you remember what we were talking about before, his wife confirmed that he'd been sober since 2003. He didn't drink, he didn't do any drugs, he didn't do anything. The only thing that was in his system, or should have been in his system, was therapeutic doses of prescription medication, which is exactly what they found when the toxicology report came back. There was no alcohol in his system. So what is with this Grey Goose bottle? I can't imagine that someone who's sober would, relapse for just one little simple nightcap of a drink. It's not like a big bottle. It's like one of the little 1.75 ml bottles. It's tiny. So what's the point? And also, was it him that drank this? I also noticed that his phone and his iPad were still there charging. So the fact that he plugged them both in and charged them means that he physically did that. He plugged them in and charged them and then got himself into bed and just never woke up. But the absolute weirdest, most inexplainable thing that I found when I was looking at these pictures is these pictures of the nightstand and the entertainment center area. And the reason that this is important is because if you look at the remotes, they're both standing up on their butt end. That's weird, okay? And I found some pictures of the Ritz-Carlton in Orlando in their hotel rooms, a clean hotel room, ready for somebody to go in, not from the Bob Saget situation, just a regular old picture. The remotes are laying down like they normally would be. So the only thing I could even explain this with is Bob Saget has some weird thing where he goes into the room and then puts both the remotes up on their base end for no reason at all, just like a weird, quirky thing. Or this is some sort of symbol of something, or a sign, or like a warning. I don't know. It's some sort of symbol. That's all I could think of. Otherwise, it doesn't even remotely make sense. Continuing on with our inconsistencies, some reports say that the police were notified or called at 4 p.m. Other reports say that the police arrived at the hotel at 4 p.m. I don't know what the truth is, you guys. I really don't. But the cops were there around 4 p.m. They go in, they assess the situation. They don't see any obvious signs of anything that happened, but he's clearly not with us anymore. So he's officially pronounced at 4:18 p.m., so I would be more inclined to believe that the cops showed up at 4 p.m. at the hotel, because if they were called, it'd probably take them like 7 to 10 minutes to get there. And then what do you got, like 7-8 minutes to pronounce him? Just doesn't seem like enough time. I really don't know what happened. Word begins to spread like wildfire that 65-year-old Bob Saget was found unresponsive in his hotel room, and there's no explanation. Nobody knows what happened. Everybody's speculating it could have been a heart attack. Other people are speculating that there's something nefarious going on. Tons of people start talking about all these different theories of what possibly could have happened to Bob. With no external injuries besides a small abrasion on the back of his head, They had nothing to go off of. They had no reason to think that any sort of foul play was going on. I don't know why, if the door was open. They just conclude that it was an accidental death and they need to wait for the autopsy results to come back to make a final decision. The medical examiner for the Orange County Sheriff's Office, Dr. Stephanie, performs the autopsy on Bob Saget's body. And what he finds is pretty troubling. He finds 6+ different wounds internally on Bob Saget's head. Not only does he find that small abrasion on the back of his head, he finds out that his skull is completely fractured. He finds subdermal hematomas, tons of brain bleeding, tons of brain swelling, and the weirdest part to me was that his occipital bones were bruised, meaning he had 2 black eyes. He hit something so hard, or something hit him so hard in the back of the head that his eyes were bruised. That's wild. Now, this isn't uncommon. It's called Racoon Eyes, and it is something that's possible. But typically for something like this to show on a person who has head trauma, they would have had to withstand either a baseball bat to the head or a fall from like 20 to 30 feet up where they then landed on their head. It just doesn't really make a whole lot of sense how he got these injuries. Regardless, the medical examiner determines that the official cause of death would be trauma to the back of the head. They're saying that he hit his head somehow when he was in this hotel room between the hours of 2:17 a.m. and 4 p.m. And though Dr. Steph, however, with rigor mortis setting in and all the other things they tested for, it seemed like he'd been gone for roughly 12 hours. So they're thinking that whatever happened around 4 a.m. And though Dr. Stephanie is able to give us what he thinks actually happened to result in him passing away, he's not able to tell us exactly how he withstood these injuries. He's not able to tell us what happened. He's just telling us, yeah, his head's broke and took him out, which isn't helpful at all. So police are trying to piece together like what possibly could have happened to him. And I want to point out that Orange County sheriffs, they've already got a bunch of scandals under their belt, so they're not necessarily the most reliable or trustworthy police source. That video that we watched, those freaking cops are literally drinking coffee. They probably stopped for coffee on the way to check on Bob Saget. They didn't seem like they were in any hurry. They didn't seem like they cared even a little bit. And they certainly didn't seem like they were dispatched to deal with someone who was supposedly unresponsive and not breathing, which is what they physically said in that 911 phone call. So that's even more confusing to me, because it would make sense if they were there to just do a wellness check on Bob and they were just lackadaisically walking through the halls, just chilling, nothing serious is going on. But they got an actual phone call, a 911 emergency call, where they were dispatched to room 962. So why were they just so chill about everything? It's so weird. But based on Dr. Stephanie's findings, the police decide that there's only really a couple of situations that really make sense. He must have hit his head on the headboard, which must be how they got the name headboard. I don't know. Or he slipped and fell maybe in the shower, or maybe he hit his head. I don't know. That's pretty much it. The entire floor is carpeted. In the bathroom, there's a slip mat when you get out of the shower, so I wouldn't imagine he slipped in the shower. But it would make more sense for him to have slipped in the shower. But no. The official findings from the police and from the autopsy comes back saying that Bob Saget must have gotten into bed and hit his head leaning back on this headboard, and that's what eventually caused this internal damage, caused these brain bleeds. And if a brain is bleeding like that for multiple hours, you're not going to last very long. In severe cases, you could last an hour to 3 hours. In less severe cases, which is what you'd think Bob's was, you can last 12 to 24 hours. So who really knows how all this happened, what happened to Bob, what hit his head, how hard did he hit his head? We really don't know. But they're saying he hit this headboard. The weird thing about that is that this headboard is padded. I mean, look at this thing. It's freaking padded as hell. So even if he did hit his head super hard, he would have had to hit it really hard. And to make matters even worse, there's another doctor who decides to take a look at this original autopsy report. He doesn't take a look at Bob Saget himself or the actual autopsy findings or anything. So he looks at this report and makes his own findings. And this doctor's name is Dr. Britz, and he finds that the trauma to Bob Saget's head is so severe that it had to have been caused by something equivalent to being hit in the head with a baseball bat or falling 20 to 30 feet onto your head. How do you do that in a hotel room that's carpeted and the headboard's padded. How do you do it? Nobody believes it because nobody can understand how this happened. The peculiar thing about this official narrative is that it comes a month later on February 9th, 2022 from the Saget family lawyer. This guy was just used within that same month by the family to keep any information from being spread out there about what happened to Bob. And now he's coming forward on February 9th saying, we've got the official autopsy report and it's going to leave no questions about what happened. This is going to clear everything up for you guys. But it doesn't. Even the autopsy report says that they don't know how these injuries were sustained. Police say that our best guess or our best theory is that he hit his head on the headboard. They even discount the fact that he might have done it in the shower. They say, no, that's not possible. We didn't find anything in there. We would have expected there to be external damage, possibly blood if that happened. So even the police don't really truly know. They're just giving their best guess. Well, this is what we think happened.
Tonight, police releasing new details and 911 calls from comedian Bob Saget's final moments.
We have an unresponsive guest in a room.
Saget's death still shrouded in mystery after he was discovered in his hotel room in January.
Non-responsive, not breathing.
Yeah. Not responsive, not breathing, and no pulse.
Police body cam video shows officers moments before entering Saget's room. It cuts off right before they enter, due to a decision made by a judge to block the release of the actor's death records after his family asked for privacy. An autopsy revealed the 65-year-old had died of trauma to the back of his head, most likely from an accidental fall. A heavily redacted police report released by the Orange County Sheriff's Office said the injury was likely caused by something hard covered by something soft. Newly released police photos taken by investigators inside Saget's hotel room showing a padded headboard and the bed where his body was found. A pair of clothes hanging in the closet, his nightstand with his phone still charging. Saget's widow, Kelly Rizzo, speaking to Hoda Kotb days after his death.
We valued every single second that we had together. So that's why it's, this is so heartbreaking. But he was just the best man I've ever known in my life.
A beloved figure's sudden and tragic death, leaving more questions than answers.
First, they're trying to control the narrative by suppressing information. Then they're trying to control the narrative by pushing their information out. That's what really triggered me into thinking, there's something fishy going on here. I'm getting cover-up vibes. So I started to ask a few more questions. I guess really just one question. What are they hiding? The first question I had was, who would really have the motive for this? And of course, the Olsen twins immediately popped up. They didn't want to be on Fuller House when they did the, reprise of Full House, and they asked them to come back, but they said no. Everybody else came back, but the Olsen twins didn't. That leads me to think that maybe they were traumatized so badly that they did not want to go back. And there's things that have come out of Bob Saget's book where he talks about using this fake doll to fondle and have fun with when the Olsen twins weren't around.
So here's the other thing I should not have done while working on that show. They gave me a rubber doll to talk to as a stand-in for camera run-throughs to represent the character of Michelle. Maybe you can finish this story for me, please. Ashley and Mary Kate were in school, so I had to camera rehearse without any other characters and just a technical crew with this 4-foot-tall rubber doll. Only adults were there. A lot of crew guys whom I like to make laugh. What could have happened next? Oh yeah, so I'm throwing it around, pretending to do stuff to it, as one would do if there were no child actors within a couple sound stages distance and you were a comedian with no moral compass in front of a crowd of people. And what I didn't know was the television monitors were turned on in the schoolroom and all the dressing rooms and in certain offices on the studio line. Like I said, I was an idiot. Jody's mom, Janice, and Candace's mom, Barbara, two very sweet people, great mothers, came down to the stage and said, "Bob, we can see what you're doing on the monitors upstairs." Jokingly as I could, I said, "Well, turn them off. I'm working down here." As usual, they were right. I should have used some part of my rational mind, my parenting mind. What I learned through that experience is, if you're making only a few crew people laugh and you're playing with a life-size doll and there are no other actors around, stop it. Take a moment to yourself and call a good therapist.
And on top of that, all these other weird things that people accuse Bob Saget of doing on the set. Then the clip I played last week of them talking about being in the shower with Dave.
We remember small things like being in a shower with Dave.
All right, let's not talk about that. Okay. I was just talking about the show.
So I immediately thought, well, maybe they were trying to get back at Bob Saget, and this was their way of getting back at him. And so maybe the police were paid off to cover this up. Maybe there's some serious cover-up going on here. Now, this might mean something, might mean nothing, but it was super interesting. I follow this Gematria account, and this account on January 2nd predicted that someone from America's Funniest Home Videos was at serious risk of possibly losing their life and being a sacrifice. And they specifically called out Bob Saget, saying that they were ultra worried that it might be him. They predicted that this would happen on January 6th of 2022. 3 days later, they're posting again saying, "We told you so." And so, yeah, they were 3 days off, but like, what? That's super weird, right? Just makes you wonder if maybe there is some credence to this whole occult cabal underbelly thing. And they really do use this gematria and these occult number systems. I don't know. I just thought it was interesting. And if you don't believe me, you can go check it out. The post is still up right now. And the craziest thing that I think I found in all of this was this video of Bob Saget talking with his wife, and they're just discussing movies. She's talking about how he kind of likes movies, and he's like, no, kind of, like, I love movies. And he's making fun of her for only liking the same few movies. And then she just starts like listing off all the movies that she likes. After seemingly like waiting for a while, Bob says, "Come on, I'm going to be found dead in bed soon."
And I know you love to also pepper in movies because you love the movies. And of course, I love movies too.
Pepper
but for
in
some
movies.
reason-
I like live for movies.
Yeah, right. But, and you know, as I said, I absolutely love movies as well.
You
but
love
there's just
5
something-
movies. You love Big
Well, that's not
Lebowski
true.
every day. You could watch Big
I love
Lebowski
Big
4 times a day.
Lebowski, The Godfather, Wayne's World, Godfather 2, Goodfellas, Casino, Scarface. But
So I don't have long to live. If these are your favorites. I'm going to be found dead in bed.
you better watch out. So
Like, I get the joke. He's kind of just saying, like, hurry it up because I may not be able to live through the rest of this story because you're taking so long. But his word choice and his situation that he presented for how it was going to happen seems pretty strange when you find out that that's exactly what happened. So that led me to believe that maybe he actually did know. Maybe he was involved with this group, and maybe he did something to upset the group or get him ostracized from this elite trafficking network or this elite dark underbelly of the entertainment world. And because of that, he knew that this was coming. Originally, I didn't think that Bob was even involved with this dark underbelly of the entertainment world. He just seems like too good of a guy. But then you start learning about his dirty side, his dirty daddy side. And when you think back to the roast in 2008, pretty much every single person that got up there talks about how Bob likes to have relations with younger girls.
His entire job consisted of saying, "Take a look at this," which is what he used to say to Mary-Kate Olsen in her dressing room.
Now should have been called Blackjack because you hit on the Olsons when they were 8. You didn't stop till they were 21.
For 8 seasons, half an hour a week, Full House kept pet off the street. In fact, 3 of them were on the show.
After all these years, I'd never met the Olsen twins. He introduced me to them. I said to him, how do I tell them apart? He says, Ashley Swallows.
And everybody's still around because there was that Super Bowl commercial with Bob Saget and John Stamos. And so Bob Saget has a new book out saying that he did a lot of inappropriate jokes. Do you remember the jokes when you were on set?
They were very inappropriate. We probably couldn't even talk about it here.
I do have a wonderful girlfriend now. She's a woman. She's well, in LA Hollywood bullshit, it's legally it's supposed to be, you know, half your age plus 7 is appropriate for an older man to date a younger woman. But I was doing the plus 7, but I wasn't doing the half your age. So I went to prison again. And man, they went at me. I had to duct tape my butthole shut. I didn't have to. I just liked it. But this wonderful woman that I met, I'm laughing alone. I don't give a f.
And I can only imagine if they're all laughing and joking and roasting Bob about this, then there has to be some truth to it, at least a little bit, even a little bit. So maybe he was involved in this deep, dark underbelly. Maybe he was involved in this sex trafficking stuff that goes on. Maybe he was involved with Epstein or Diddy. He ran in all the same circles, so who really knows? That gave me some pretty good ideas as to who might want to take him out, but I couldn't figure out the logistics of it. I just couldn't. I couldn't figure out a way that somebody could potentially cause the damage that was caused to his head without leaving any external damage or blood or any other signs that somebody was there. But then I realized that he was involved with a completely different dark side of the entertainment and elite circle. Now, the timing of everything with Bob Saget passing, this all happened very early January of 2022. Now, if you can recall, the lockdown stuff all happened March 2020-ish and lasted until, I don't even remember, sometime in like mid-2021. So things were still pretty fresh in terms of the COVID situation. And then around this time when Bob Saget passed, this is when the Omicron variant stuff was all coming out, and everybody's pushing all these vaccines and booster shots and all this other stuff. And Bob Saget was actually one of the main people who was a huge proponent for the vaccine. He would openly talk about how he gets the vaccine. He included it in all of his stand-up routines. He has multiple X and Instagram posts where he talks about getting vaccinated and getting his booster shot. And in December 13th, I believe it was, he made a post talking about how he went to the doctor and he got his booster shot, and instead of getting it in his arm, he got it in his butt. And he was trying to be funny, but I think he was also trying to tell people like, hey, I got my booster shot, and trying to be like a role model in that aspect.
Well, be careful out there and do whatever you got to do to be safe. And I'm not even going to preach. I try not to preach, about, I got my booster shot. I'm 65, so I got it yesterday, day before. And I was hurting. I had it. I've been telling people I got it in my ass, but I got it. I had it right below my balls because I wanted them to get bigger. So
yeah,
I think that's a real booster. It raises you an inch off your chair. So that's what it's meant to do.
I think I'll do it that way.
Do it that way. And tell the pharmacist that Bob told you to do that.
All I can really say is that I guess that vaccine shot that he got really was a special shot. He then goes on to have this interview with Dr. LaPook, and Dr. LaPook is a huge advocate for vaccines. He's a doctor. He is also close with the government, and honestly, I don't really know how tied this guy is, but he's a huge advocate for the vaccine. Every chance he gets, he's on media networks telling people that they need to get the vaccine and trying to kind of minimize the fears about these vaccines and make people feel more safe and confident in taking them. This interview that he does with Bob Saget was very concerning to me and made me extremely happy that I never got that stupid vaccine, because what he basically explains to Bob is that typical vaccines go through a 3-phase process before they're actually released and sent out into the public to be used by everybody. And phase 1, they start with a small group of people. They get data, they analyze the data, they see what symptoms and side effects are coming up. Then if it's good, they pass it. It moves to phase 2. They do the same thing with a larger sample size. They analyze the data. They see what's going on here. Is this something that we can keep pushing to phase 3? If we get to phase 3, this is a much, much bigger sample size. And it's honestly the last piece of the puzzle before they're able to release it to actually be used to help prevent illnesses. In terms of the COVID-19 vaccine, that's not what happened.
The bottom line is that the vaccine was then started to be made and went into trial in March. Now, this was 2 months. March 2020 was 2 months before Operation Warp Speed even started.
Right.
So I know that term Operation Warp Speed, it was kind of a tough term because it sort of implied to people that it's going so fast, that it's like too fast, maybe.
But it was a very positive thing. It is one of the more positive through the government.
And I was just about to say that what Operation Warp Speed did, and you have to give them credit. And I said this last night on national television after the State of the Union. You got to give them credit for this, which is once you had the vaccine in hand and you were doing stage 1, phase 1, phase 2, phase 3. And for people who don't know, phase 1 is a very small safety study. What's the dose that we should give? And, is it relatively safe in small numbers? Phase 2 is bigger numbers where you're starting to see safety, but also does it work? And phase 3 is the big larger numbers, thousands or tens of thousands of people to see, over a longer period of time, does it work? What are the side effects? Things like that. Normally, it could take years to get a vaccine from the time you have it in your hand till it's tested, or even years from the time you say, let's make a vaccine.
Right.
Because, that was made so quickly compared to what the polio vaccine, how long that took. So what Operation Warp Speed did was it cut the red tape without cutting corners. It was all hands on deck for everybody at the FDA. And normally there's a pause between phase 1, phase 2, phase 3. They said, let's look at the data, let's analyze it, let's see, does it make sense? It was just, it was continuous. And they said, but they had a safety monitoring saying, if any safety signal comes up, we're going to stop this. And so it happened very, very quickly. And that summer of 2020, thousands and then tens of thousands of people were tested. And by the time they got the emergency use authorization, it's an authorization, it's not approved yet, but it's an emergency use authorization. There were 74,000 people in the Pfizer and Moderna combined trials, 30,000 for Moderna and 44,000 for Pfizer. See how arithmetic is important?
Exactly.
30,000 plus 44,000.
I can do that. I can do that math. I have a calculator on my phone.
If you look up Operation Warp Speed in relation to the COVID-19 vaccine, it essentially just bulldozes through phases 1 through 3, basically making it a large phase 1. He makes it seem like they went through all the phases, but they didn't. Basically what they did was they just released the vaccine and allowed these people who were opting into taking this vaccine to be human lab rats. And they had safety protocols to be able to make sure if something starts to go wrong, then we can pull it real quick. We'll monitor everything, and if things go wrong, then we'll get rid of it and we'll start over and we'll do more testing. But that's not what happened. They push it out, and basically all of these people who are taking this vaccine are now just human guinea pigs for this vaccine. And essentially the way they were able to make this happen is because of the pandemic. They authorized this emergency use authorization, which basically says that the vaccine is not actually approved by the FDA or approved by any sort of government agency, but it has been authorized by said agencies for use in the general public. Nothing about that sounds good to me. And I can understand what their reasoning would be. We need to get this thing done quickly because it could take years and years for this to actually be a real vaccine, and we need this to be a vaccine like yesterday. So I can understand the need to push through all these different phases, but the fact that they just pushed through all of them and then basically used humans as test subjects to see if it does or does not work, that doesn't give me much confidence. Now, some of the common side effects of this vaccine are pretty standard, pretty normal. Headache, nausea, dizziness, confusion, fatigue, lethargia, just things like that, stuff that you hear pretty often when it comes to vaccines or medication. In my opinion, everybody I know that got the vaccine got COVID. So I don't know. I think it also, one of the side effects is COVID-19. Some of the more rare side effects you might get, but they're seen often enough to be listed as a side effect, is an enlarged heart and blood clotting. Now, in the official autopsy report for Bob Saget, not only did they notate all of these different skull fractures and brain bleeds and all this other stuff going on with his head, but then they just kind of anecdotally mentioned that he had an enlarged heart that was 95% blocked with blood clots. Okay, now we're getting somewhere. And in doing my research, I found a ton of stories of just, random people online leaving comments underneath Bob Saget's videos and other comments on different medical forums and things where people say that they literally pass out or faint, like they are standing up, they feel fine, and then out of nowhere, they just aren't fine and they wake up on the ground. They just faint and they don't understand why or what's happening. And it very likely could be because their enlarged heart, it's not able to pump blood as fast, and it's dealing with all of these blood clots, which could cause temporarily loss of blood or oxygen to your brain, causing you to faint. Crazy stuff. But it gets even crazier, you guys. I couldn't have planned this better myself if I tried. On February 5th, 2022, literally about a month after Bob Saget passed, a young comedian named Heather McDonald is on stage preaching to the crowd about how she's been super vaxxed. She's got every single vaccine and booster and this and that. She even says she's got the shingles vaccine. And as she's talking about this, and as she's trying to make her joke, she says something about how even Jesus, or how Jesus must really love her. And then right after that, she just hits the floor.
I don't mean to brag. I don't care, but I want you to know, double vaxxed, booster, flu shot, and I'm going to be honest, I have the shingle shot too. And I still get my period. What? Yes. Traveled, went to Mexico twice, did shows, meet and greets, never got COVID. Clearly, Jesus loves me the most. Seriously. So nice, so nice.
And you're like, whoa, is this real? What's happening right now? And she doesn't get up. And then the crowd starts getting worried. And then security comes over and helps her. And then they take her off the stage and she's taken to a hospital. Come to find out, she fractured her skull. She did survive though, probably because she was in front of a whole audience of people. And then she's posting online about how scary it is that she feels that what happened to her is also the same thing that probably happened to Bob Saget. And she feels like it's related to the vaccines. Like I said, I couldn't have planned it more perfectly myself. She's literally talking about being super vaxxed and then passes out from being super vaxxed. That's so crazy. I was then able to find some reports from one of the ladies that actually worked at the venue that Bob Saget performed at. And her job at the venue is to essentially just take care of the artist when they're there. Get them food, drinks, whatever they need, really. She's just basically their assistant for the night. And she was there. She didn't talk directly with Bob too much, but she was there listening, and she overheard him talking to other people. And one of the things she overheard him talking about was how he was still feeling sick with COVID-19. He had been diagnosed with it roughly a month before that. He got his booster shot, but he was saying that he was still just having a hard time getting over the sickness. He was still feeling under the weather. And even stranger, he said he was having hearing problems, including tinnitus. And one of the main complaints that people who have gotten the vaccine and the booster shot have complained about is randomly getting tinnitus. So it seems like it is a common symptom of the vaccine or of the virus. To add even more to that, the autopsy report also said that he tested positive for COVID-19. So he did, at the time of his passing, have COVID-19. She also overheard him talking about how he really wasn't feeling up to doing this tour and doing this show, but this is what he does. This is what he's here for, and he's here to make people laugh. And so he kind of just is like hyping himself up to power through it. And everybody who was at the show said it was a great show, super funny, didn't seem like anything was off, didn't seem sick, didn't seem like anything was wrong at all. But this is my theory. He obviously had an enlarged heart and lots of blockages going on, lots of blood clots. So I think that after sitting for two and a half hours driving back to this hotel from Jacksonville, he probably, I mean, you can keep blood clots in a certain place from sitting, and then when you stand up, the blood pressure changes. It might have loosened one of those clots. Something might have gotten loose to where he then goes up to his hotel room. One of those clots finally makes its way either into his heart or into his brain. Something causes him to faint. He faints super hard, likely hits the bathroom hard marble floor because there's no other place in this hotel room where he could have possibly hit his head that would, in my opinion, cause this kind of a fracture and damage. He faints, hits his head super hard, and then realizes like, oh shoot, man, I just fainted. Like I need to lay down, man. I don't know what's going on. Because when I'm feeling sick or when I'm feeling lightheaded or I'm feeling like something bad is going to happen, or if something bad just happened to me, usually the first thing I do is like sit down, relax. Maybe what happened was he immediately fell and was like, oh God, my head, I need to lay down, and laid down, and then ended up falling asleep and then passed. Okay, cool. So your theory sounds very similar to the real theory. What's the difference? Well, I'll tell you what the difference is. They're trying to omit the fact that this vaccine was the reason for what happened to Bob Saget. especially considering the fact that he is a huge proponent and activist for people getting this vaccine. He spent nearly 2 hours talking with this Dr. Lapook guy, trying to encourage people to not be scared of the vaccine and to take it. So if somehow all of these details get released saying that what happened to Bob was in direct relation to the COVID-19 vaccine, that ain't good. That's not good for publicity. That's not good for Pfizer or Moderna or any of these companies. So why would they want that to get out? They wouldn't, and they won't let it get out. And even further than that, the family sues the Orange County Sheriff's Department to make sure that this stuff stays sealed. So it hints to me that there was a bigger cover-up going on, essentially just trying to protect Big Pharma. And we know how powerful Big Pharma is, and we know the lengths that they'll go to try and maintain their status, their secrets, and to keep pushing out their agenda. So though I would be really stoked to have found some information leading to some really crazy story about some deep dark cabal that took him out, Occam's razor says that the most likely explanation is usually the most obvious one. And in my opinion, this is the most obvious one. It's just that for whatever reason, there's people behind the scenes that don't want this to get out. So they come up with this brain bleed head trauma situation. Who knows if he even had this extensive damage on his head? I only know it because there's one single medical examiner who did an autopsy and looked at the body and told us that this is what he found. But I don't know if this guy's trustworthy. The Orange County Sheriff's Office does not have a good track record with being truthful and honest and not covering up things. So that very well could be just a scapegoat for what happened to him. That would make a whole lot of sense because nobody seems to believe that this makes any sense at all. Nobody thinks that the damages that he sustained were even possible in that hotel room. So whether he sustained those damages or not, I can't say for sure. But if we take the autopsy report prima facie at face value, then we have to assume that this autopsy is real and truthful and that he did sustain these head trauma injuries. And if that's the case, then we have to figure out what's a logical explanation to explain these injuries. And to me, this is the only one. Because 65-year-old Bob Saget is not jumping into bed after a 2-hour-long drive and a super long 2-hour set in Jacksonville, Florida. He's not jumping into bed at 2 a.m. smacking his head on the back headboard. Like, it's just not happening. And even if he was just sitting in bed and went to lay down in bed and hit his head, that's not going to be strong enough to do that kind of damage. So in my opinion, he had to have fainted for some reason. And in my opinion, he fainted because he got that vaccine. He was super up to date. He was super boosted. I don't know, you guys. I'm personally under the firm belief that most of these theories that we see out there, most of these ideas that people call tinfoil hatty, I still feel like they're all connected. There's all some common denominator where they all share something in common. And maybe it's just the people involved, or maybe it's the agenda that they're all working towards. I don't know what it is exactly, but I firmly believe that they're all connected. It's very likely that they've been pushing this virus vaccine for some other reason than they're actually trying to portray to us. They're not trying to save us from this vaccine. Maybe it's population control, because that is probably one of our biggest issues affecting the entire world right now, is overpopulation. So maybe this was their attempt at lowering the population a little bit. Who knows, really? All I know is that COVID freaked everybody out. These vaccines immediately were like a saving grace to everyone, and everybody started getting them. It just makes me wonder what is in these vaccines. We don't really know. And why are they pushing it so hard? Why were they pushing it so hard when they didn't even know if it was safe or going to work? We were all just guinea pigs being tested on. They didn't even know if it was going to work until after the first round of people started taking them, and then who knows what the actual results were? Who knows how many people actually passed away from this? Who knows if they passed away a month later and it was just attributed to COVID instead of the vaccine? I don't know, you guys. It definitely leaves a lot of questions for me. And I really want to know what you guys think about all this. Do you think it was some deep, dark cabal that put a hit out on him? Or do you think that I'm closer with my theory in this whole COVID vaccine situation? Let me know what you guys think. Drop it in the comments. The last thing I wanted to leave you guys with was just a personal anecdote. And this is something that happened to me not too long ago when I was working at my previous job at Enterprise Rent-A-Car. And we had a guy named Jim. He was a driver. So essentially all he did all day was drive dirty cars down to get cleaned, and then the clean cars back up after they were cleaned. And he would park them and then start over. Now, Jim was a huge advocate for the vaccine. Jim was always sick with COVID. And it was my firm belief that he was getting sick with COVID because he was getting this vaccine. He would get the vaccine, he would get the boosters. Every time he needed a booster, he would get it. When the Omicron variant came out, any new variants that come out, he gets another new vaccine and another new booster shot. And he's tried all the different brands. He would tell me which one's better than others. And I literally didn't care because I never planned on taking it. Still don't. Jim was always sick. He was always out for a week or two at a time because he was always sick with COVID. And he would test himself, and it was always COVID. Fast forward a couple weeks, and Jim is just not there. I'm like, yo, where's Jim? No Jim today? And they're like, oh, no, you didn't hear? Apparently over my weekend, he had fainted on the job, and he had hit his face on something so hard. He had a black eye. His face was all cut up from scraping on the cement because we worked outside. And he had bruises all over the side of his arm and his body. And Jim was an older guy. I mean, I think he was probably in his 60s. And so that kind of a fall could have been honestly deadly for him. So I'm glad that he was okay and made it through. But Jim was out for 3 months after that, recovering. 3 months. And when he came back, he had a really hard time doing the job because it involved a lot of walking out to the cars, driving him down, walking over to get a new car. It was a lot of walking in a day. And he would be short on breath. He was having a real hard time, like, standing up and not fainting all the time, and it was starting to worry him so badly that he actually had to quit the job. So not only is this happening to Heather McDonald, not only did this happen to Bob Saget, not only did this happen to hundreds of thousands of people online who notated it in different forums, but it also happened to a friend of mine. And I didn't realize at the time that that's what it was. It wasn't until I did all this research on this whole Bob Saget case that I started realizing that this is something that happens. I don't know. I just thought you guys should know that because, well, this isn't just like a made-up story that happened to some celebrity and it's so far removed from us that it's not possible. No, this happened to me in my personal life. I know somebody who I saw faint like that. And I am 100 on the fact that it had to be from these vaccines. And like I said before, you guys, all these different theories and all these different things that are going on in the world, they're all connected. All of them. And I'm not sure how, I'm not sure where, I'm not sure why, but it's connected. And they're certainly using it to control people. I know that. I want to hear if you guys have any personal stories that are similar to mine. And I'm also curious what you guys think about this whole theory about Bob. So yeah, drop it in the comments. But I really appreciate you guys sitting with me and hanging with me for this long, listening to me talk about Bob Saget and his crazy story. And if you just can't get enough sobering stories, then I'm going to leave some videos at the end here. I've been told by multiple people that it's really annoying that I point to the screen when the videos aren't there. So I'm just going to tell you, I'm going to leave 2 playlists. I'm going to let YouTube pick a video for you. And then the last one's going to be the subscribe button. And if you don't subscribe and you're still sitting here listening to me talk, I don't get it, dude. What are you doing? Just hit the subscribe button. That way we can just do this every week. We can make it a date and it doesn't have to be weird anymore. All right. But no joke. Thanks you guys for hanging out. Look forward to doing this again next week for another one. But until then, stay safe, stay sober, don't get the vaccine. Later, sobers.
Fault. Oh, Bob Saget! Oh, Bob Saget! Oh, Bob Saget! Oh, shit!
Let's go.